This is the all-new HYPERBOOM. It's the biggest and baddest speaker Ultimedia has ever made, and I absolutely love it. This thing sounds great, but it's also very versatile. So if you're looking for a speaker that you can use at home, but then just as easily take it on the go with you, then I think the HYPERBOOM is a great option to consider. Okay, I'm gonna put this down now because I'm very sore. So price-wise, the UE HYPERBOOM retails for $400. So naturally, its most direct competitor is the super popular JBL boombox. But nonetheless, the HYPERBOOM is UE's most expensive speaker in their lineup. But I think it's well worth the money. So if you want to pick this speaker up, it'll be linked down below. Now, first off, let's go over the HYPERBOOM's form factor. It's a 14-inch tall rectangle that weighs in at 13 pounds. There's a fabric mesh that goes all around the body, and the end caps are super dense plastic. Now, all of the control buttons are laid on top of the speaker. You've got a power button, super large capacitive volume buttons, and you've got your source and media control buttons, which we'll get into a little more in depth in a minute. Now, overall, the HYPERBOOM has a very simple design to it, and it's reasonably sized. So if you're looking for a speaker to use at home that's really just going to disappear into your decor, then the HYPERBOOM is a good option. But like I mentioned earlier, you can also just as easily take it on the go with you because the speaker has a built-in rubber carrying handle, and it's also IPX4 water resistant. So if the speaker gets caught in the rain or if a drink gets spilled on it, it's gonna be perfectly fine. Now, when it comes to tech specs, this speaker has an advertised battery life of 24 hours, but that's with the volume set at 50%. Real-world use with this speaker set at 80% volume, I'm getting about a battery life of around 8 to 9 hours of playback time, and when this speaker is set at max volume, the speaker's good for 3 hours of playback time. So overall, the HYPERBOOM has solid battery life. And again, I'm gonna put this down because I'm sore. But also, if you want, the HYPERBOOM has a USB-A out port so that you can charge your own devices. My only critique here is that I do wish the HYPERBOOM had a USB-C port, because a lot more phones these days are starting to come with the USB-C cables, like a lot of Android devices and even the new iPhone 11 Pro. But also, while we're here, let's address everything else that's inside this compartment. Naturally, the HYPERBOOM has an aux jack if you want to use a wired connection with your speaker. But what's more interesting here is that the HYPERBOOM also has an optical port, which is super rare for a Bluetooth speaker like this. So if you want, you can hook the speaker up directly to your TV, gaming console, or maybe even a receiver. So hypothetically speaking, if you're looking for a speaker that you can use at home to listen to music with and use it with your TV, and then just as easily unplug it and take it on the go with you, then the HYPERBOOM is your guy. The only thing to keep in mind here is that you do have to supply your own audio cable and optical cable, because the speaker only comes included with a charging cable. Now, when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, the speaker's rocking Bluetooth 5.0, and it can be connected to 2 Bluetooth devices at the same time. So you and a friend can both be DJing. But the real interesting thing here is that you can actually switch between either of your 2 Bluetooth connected devices directly from the speaker itself. So hypothetically speaking, if your friend is playing a song that you don't like, then you can switch back to your phone and start playing music from there. Now, when it comes to Bluetooth performance, the speaker's basically perfect. It has a wireless range of over 100 feet, which is way more than what you actually need. But more importantly, the speaker has 0 latency across the board whenever you're watching movies or videos with the speaker, whether you're using an Android device or iPhone, which is always good. But something that I do want to point out is that unfortunately, this speaker doesn't support higher quality audio codecs like AAC or aptX. The speaker is strictly using SBC. But now let's talk about the HYPERBOOM speaker setup, because it's pretty interesting. Now, this speaker has dual 4.5-inch woofers and dual 1-inch tweeters shooting out the front of the speaker. And then there's dual 3.5-inch by 7.5-inch passive radiators shooting out the back. So no, this isn't a 360-degree speaker because the majority of the sound is coming out the front of the speaker. But since the passive radiators are located on the back of the speaker, if you were to place it up against the wall, then its bass is going to get amplified. Overall, the speaker sounds great, but so that you can hear for yourself, we're going to jump into a sound test.
get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I do it all before I die. I wanna get it on tonight. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I wanna get you one more time. One more time. One more time. One more time. I want it one more time. I really need to make it right. Energy I overdose. 'Cause I'm ready to reload. I need it one more time. But baby, then again twice. But I don't know if I'm ready to let go. I'm gonna have you one more time. I'm gonna hit it one more night. With you. With you. I am committed 'cause I know it's you I want. Hope I never see you go home. I'll come along. I'm gonna have you one more time. I'm gonna have you one more night. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I do it all before I die. I wanna get it on tonight. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I wanna get you one more time. One more time. One more time. One more time. Ooh, if I wanna take it slow, I don't need my phone. I know how to picture in my mind the nights with you. I'm ready to enjoy the ride. I don't wanna die, but I could die in your arms 'cause I don't need to live forever. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I do it all before I die. I wanna get it on tonight. I wanna get you one more time. I really wanna cross the line. I wanna get you one more time. One more time. One more time. One more time.
So, like you may have just heard, the HYPERBOOM is just a very good sounding speaker, period. It sounds very clear, it has a wide soundstage, and distortion is a non-issue with this speaker at higher volumes. But what's really impressive about this speaker is just the sheer amount of bass coming out of this relatively small form factor. Even if you don't have the speaker up against a wall like it's intended to, it still has a lot of bass. But if you do place the speaker up against a wall, then its bass is going to get amplified. Now, just as a heads up, this sound test was done with the HYPERBOOM set to its standard EQ. But if you want, you can go into this speaker's app and customize its EQ and make it sound however you want. So if you want more bass, you can do that, or if you want to bring the mids out a little, you can also do that. But this now brings us to its adaptive EQ feature. Basically, the speaker uses a built-in microphone to listen to what it's playing, and it adjusts its EQ to make it sound as balanced as possible, depending on what music you're playing and what room you're in. This is very similar to what the Apple HomePod does. Now, when it comes to max volume, the speaker gets more than loud enough to fully engulf a large room with music, and it's also good for the outdoors. But I do want to point out that the performance of the speaker doesn't really change all that much when it's plugged in versus when it's not. Now, this is something worth pointing out because a lot of similar speakers like this do see a performance bump when they're plugged in. Now, this isn't a big deal because the HYPERBOOM still sounds impressive, but I think it's still worth mentioning. But also, the HYPERBOOM's app has a few other notable features. Most importantly to me, you can remotely power on or off your speaker, which is just super convenient. You can also switch between all of your audio sources directly from your phone. So let's just say hypothetically, if you have the HYPERBOOM hooked up to your TV through the optical port, then you can switch its source straight from your phone, just as you're getting ready to watch the new episode of Clone Wars. And finally, there's also Party Up. So you can pair the HYPERBOOM up to another HYPERBOOM, or you can pair it up to a Megaboom 3, Boom 3, a Boom 2, and so on. And for those wondering, Party Up supports up to 150 speakers, which is just overkill. But overall, I think the new HYPERBOOM is sick. First and foremost, the HYPERBOOM sounds great. The speaker sounds very clear even at max volume, but the speaker also sounds very full, especially with the amount of bass the speaker's putting out. And again, remember, thanks to the HYPERBOOM speaker setup, you can always amplify its bass even more by simply just putting it up against a wall. But then there's all of the extra added features on the HYPERBOOM that just make the speaker even better, like a very solid battery life, a customizable EQ, and then there's that optical port that makes the speaker very versatile. I know this might be a little soon, but I think this could be the speaker to get for summer 2020. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit that like button and get subscribed. It helps out more than you realize. If you want to pick any of the products up mentioned in this video, those will be linked in the description down below, and you can also support the channel by checking out the merch store. But other than that, I'll catch you next time.